Good afternoon. Welcome to EduSat Network. Friend, today we are going to discuss rural society. We will try to understand the different aspect of rural society, the dominant feature, how it's having impact on different other forces of the village society. So we will try to understand in a holistic way of the rural society. And for discussion on this very topic, we have in the studio senior academician and sociologist Dr. Surinder Singh Jodhka. He is a professor of sociology in the Center for Study of Social System in Jawaharlal Nehru University, and he has written a number of books, but the one book is very popular among students and a scholar in Village Society. So today we are going to discuss the rural society from in this perspective, and Dr. Surinder Singh Jodhka will help us to understand this topic and give insight how to how to understand the village society and rural society. So now we have I welcome him for the EduSat lecture. Welcome, sir.
Thank you. Friends, as has been pointed out, today we are talking about the rural society or village society as the concept has come to be understood in social sciences, but it has also become part of our common knowledge, the way we look at societies, the way we look at settlements, the way we look at human identities. Rural and urban have become very core categories through which we identify people, distinguish and evaluate them. This is how societies have evolved in recent times, that there are two types of settlements, rural settlements and urban settlements. And urban societies are kind of city kind of societies where they have large population, modern kind of social formations, etc., etc. And rural societies are supposed to be the opposite of that. For example, in census also, Indian census, we make this as basic distinction. When population is calculated, we make a distinction between rural population and urban population. So rural population is supposed to be gradually declining and urban population is supposed to be gradually increasing. And this has been the trend all over the world. So when we think of development, again rural and urban become very critical categories, because somehow urban is seen as the site of development, site of modernity, and the direction in which societies are going. And rural is seen as still something which is not yet developed, something which has to kind of become part of the city, or gradually it has to kind of decline. And this is what has happened in most parts of the world. If you look at, for example, the developed countries of Western Europe, North America and Asia, the proportion of rural population in big countries or developed countries is not more than 2 or 3 or at the most 5%. While India is still a developing country, as we like to call it, and Indian society also has experienced significant urbanization. Urban population has been growing quite rapidly. If we were to compare with 1951, we have large cities which have grown, and you go to any city or any town, you see the population is consistently growing every 5 years, 10 years. Some cities are kind of growing to the extent of becoming nearly double of their size that was a decade or 2 decades earlier. But India also still has a large rural population, in the sense that even in 2011 census, nearly 70%, 69% plus population of India is listed as rural, categorized as rural, where people live in rural areas. Our development policies also follow this classification of population, because people living in rural areas are also presumed to require certain kind of things. So we have lots of money being spent by Government of India on what we call as rural development, and we are expecting that the pace of urbanization will grow, or there is a kind of urbanization of rural areas. The urban amenities are being provided to people living in rural areas. So what are these categories? Are these simple categories of rural and urban, like man, women, or small child and old man, or is it more to it? I mean, there's something kind of less acceptable in this classification. What I'm going to discuss with you are both characteristics of what we call as rural society and its opposite, the urban society, and the problem with this kind of classification of societies into rural and urban societies. right from the 16th, 17th century or 18th century, more specifically the 19th century with development of capitalism in Western countries, we see growth of new kind of cities, the industrial modern city. And this is the city where you have not only modern industry, and before modern industry, you have this city where you have development of, for example, education, universities. Most of the old universities, whether you go to Italy or you go to England or you go to any other country in Europe, the modern universities all came up in urban areas, in urban centers, in cities. And that's where, in a sense, elite of the country lived. So city was a site always seen as far ahead of the countryside. The countryside are the rural areas or the villages. So villages were the places where you still had agriculture, you had people who were not educated, and you had other kind of cultural traditions. So when social sciences were taking shape in the 19th century, early 20th century, you had the emergence of two different kinds of categories much more sharply. That there are scholars who would study rural society and there are scholars who would study urban society. For example, in the discipline of sociology, there was this division in particularly in the United States of America between what is called as rural sociology and urban sociology. And there are separate departments, and some of them still exist. They are called departments of rural sociology. And rural sociology, obviously, that means they study rural society and assume that there is something very distinctive about rural society, like we talk about Indian society being different from, say, American society or German society or Japanese society being different from the Chinese society or Pakistani society. Similarly, people thought that rural society had a kind of character of its own, like in sociology we call something like it has a sui generis character. There's something out there, like you can see this book. This book is a reality out there. This is something that you can't deny. So similarly, rural society was a reality out there, something which could be identified, which could be analyzed, which could be studied, and you could make understanding or laws about its understanding. How is rural society functioning and how it is likely to evolve. So there is this distinction between rural and urban. The relationship between the two is that rural is ahead of urban. So rural gradually would decline or would become urban, or the rural population would move to urban. So there is a process of evolution within which these categories are kind of placed or understood. How did they define the rural, or what was rural society, or what was the character of rural society? Very simple, in very obvious kind of ways, that urban societies, urban centers are large settlements, while rural societies are small settlements. Small means that the population is smaller and there is some kind of simplicity, right? While urban centers are complex. Urban center, you will find varieties of populations, different ethnicities, different groups, all kinds of diversities, rich and poor. While rural societies are simple, even though there are differences, these differences are not very significant. So rural societies are small settlements, simple in nature, and the nature of relationship that people have with each other is of informal nature, right? Everybody knows everyone else, and people call each other by name, and they are identified by their family or their community or their kinship. So that's how you identify yourself. So there is a kind of communitarian understanding of each other, that this person belongs to this particular caste or this particular family or this particular community, this particular group. While in urban areas you have anonymity, in the sense that we are all known by our names or individuals, right? There is a process of individualization because we don't know if the person is coming from one part of the city, the other person might have never visited that area. So you are not able to recognize the person, you are not able to identify what kind of social background he or she may be coming from. So rural societies are, in a sense, communities. The word community is also associated with rural society, where there is a kind of internal cohesiveness. Everybody knows everyone else, and there is some kind of understanding about rural society which is shared by everyone. So everyone is is expected to behave in a particular manner. So there is this common set of values that people living in rural areas or in that small community would share. Everybody would agree that we should respect our elders. Everybody would agree that we should keep certain kind of things out of the city or out of the settlement. Everybody would agree that these are the people who should be respected more than others. These are the people who would command power and authority in the community, and these are the people who would remain on the margin. Similarly, rural societies are also much more patriarchal in the sense that rural family is very different from urban family. We have this notion of rural family being a joint or extended kinship-based family, that it's not only man, women, and children who live together, but invariably people identify with a larger family, their grandparents, their cousins, everyone in a sense is also likely to live together. Even when they're not living together under one roof or using one kitchen, they would still have some kind of sense of identification with each other. They're all together at one place. Sometimes they will also have common land, etc. So you have joint and extended kind of family system. In contrast to rural areas, in urban areas you would have smaller families or nuclear families or just individuals living on their own. Occupation is also very important when it comes to rural and urban areas, and that is the most critical variable. For example, in the Indian context, we identify urban areas by nature of occupation people have. So rural areas, as you would already kind of speculate, are identified with agriculture. Right? 2/3 or 75%, sometimes everyone working in rural areas is somehow or the other connected with agriculture or primary sources of production. It could be mining, it could be agriculture, it could be horticulture, it could be dairy farming. So we have a variety of occupations which are identified with rural settlement, and that's what people living in rural areas do. Social environment in rural areas is also supposed to be very different from urban areas. In terms of occupation, urban areas are supposed to be centers of industry and service sector, but environmentally also, social environment, ecology is very different of rural areas when you compare with urban areas. For example, in rural areas, you would not find any slum. Everyone is part of the same settlement, and people in a sense live together, even though there could be very strong divisions internally, but people in rural areas are living together. So there are various characteristics that social scientists have identified which distinguish rural society from urban society. And within that, then they would also go to the extent of saying that in rural areas, you have a different kind of systems of social control. For example, in urban areas, if somebody does crime or deviates from what is considered as normal, there would be, police force, or there would be formal state machinery that would control them. If you violate traffic light, there would be, traffic police that would catch you, and there are regulations and formal laws under which you are covered. While in rural areas, you have informal institutions of social control. If somebody does something odd, then it would be the local community which would take over, the family would put pressure, and everything kind of is done informally. There is something interesting in this, that this notion of rural society does seem to be true, in the sense that in most areas of the world, you would find rural society are essentially peasant communities, that people who cultivate land, live with other communities like them, and they have a kind of smaller settlement, and smaller settlement would also determine what kind of lifestyle they would have, what kind of expectation they would have, what kind of social and cultural and political life they would have. But over the years, in social sciences, particularly in sociology, there has also been a strong criticism of this idea of rural society, that this whole notion of rural society as it is conceptualized in rural sociology has its own problems, because it doesn't really talk about the actual realities of complexities of societies by simplifying them into rural and urban. So what are those problems? The problems are, as I'm suggesting, that the notion of rural and its opposite as urban tends to divide societies through these binaries or dichotomous categories that you are either urban or rural, while in reality what we have is the reality is much more complex. People living in rural areas, they are not necessarily employed in agriculture. They could also be employed in urban areas but still living in rural areas. Or the other way around, people who are working in agriculture may be living in urban areas. So rural and urban are two types of settlements, but that is not completely opposite to each other. They could also be kind of meeting with each other. But more importantly, this one is that the question of rural and urban being constructed as binaries. So that is a problem. But more importantly, it tends to essentialize the rural, essentialize in the sense that rural people or rural communities are supposed to have certain kind of features, certain kind of characters almost everywhere in the world. And that is something which is supposed to stay as it is. But it doesn't, right? It's complicated, and rural societies are also very diverse kind of societies. Human beings are living there, human beings are living in urban areas. If they get married to each other, one woman from urban area or man from rural area or the other way around, how can we cancel out this possibility? So what are we talking about? Are rural and urban two different kinds of societies, or they are part of the same society? And that is the main point that is made by people, that rural is not a sui generis reality with its own integrated social system, with its own laws. Rural is part of the larger society. So this is a kind of functionalist notion of rural which tries to homogenize the rural into something very concrete, something very specific. Well, the reality is, and that is the third point that I am making, that like all other societies, rural societies are also changing all the time. As I told you in the beginning also, that there is an assumption behind this understanding of rural and urban, that there is a process of evolution from rural to urban. That itself presumes that there will be process of change. And this process of change is kind of unidirectional, that people from rural areas would eventually go into urban areas, which is also actually not true. There are societies like India where things have changed radically in last 50 years or 100 years. India is a very different kind of society today than it used to be even 40 or 50 years back. And as we discussed earlier, there has not been as much urbanization as was expected to be, or as one would expect in a country which is quite developed. You go to rural areas of most part of India, everyone is connected to urban areas, even though they continue to live in rural areas, but the process of change in rural areas is so radical, so significant, that you can't really recognize what it used to exist 30 or 40 or 50 years ago. So every 10 years you have a kind of new trend emerging. There's a large number of literature that is coming out from rural areas which shows the process of change. And this is something that we will perhaps discuss later on, the kind of change that has happened in rural areas in India. But the point is that rural society has its own dynamics of change, and this dynamics of change is not unique. Its dynamics of change is not independent of what is happening elsewhere. So it is a connection with the urban areas. For example, when mobile phone comes, they are not confined to urban areas. They also go to rural areas. When televisions come, they are not confined to rural areas, urban areas. They also go to rural areas. When modern education is concerned, it's not confined to urban areas. There are also schools and colleges which are open in rural areas, and gradually people living in rural areas also get educated, and they continue to live in rural areas. They don't necessarily move out of rural areas to urban areas. And people come and work in urban areas, and then they go back to the villages, either as commuters, but many of them also work in urban areas all their working life, and then they go back to their homes in rural areas. So there is a kind of circular migration that is happening, that people go to urban areas and then come back. Similarly, there is a lot of literature which shows that people could be migrating from one part of rural settlements to another part of rural settlements for work, for various other reasons. So there is also rural to rural migration. So rural has its own dynamics of change, which is not necessarily following an evolutionary pattern and moving towards urban areas. So rural is a much more complex reality. Rural is much more diverse, and that is the next point, that the point about diversity, that the assumption that rural and urban societies are two different type of societies works on the point that rural is a kind of homogeneous social category where everyone is working in agriculture as a peasant or cultivator or landless laborer. But actual reality is that rural societies historically have been very diverse. Rural society of India, for example, has always been caste divided society, and when it is caste divided society, you have a variety of occupations. There are some people who own land, who are cultivators, but large number of people who are in the servicing sector. India has had a kind of traditional servicing sector in terms of caste-based occupations. There are artisans, there are cobblers, there are barbers, there are scavengers, there are people who work with skin and shoes, cobblers, etc., etc. So you have these kinds of divisions in rural society which are very complex. Diversity is also of settlements. That's the next point, that there are varieties of settlements. There is not simple rural and urban. If we look at any other country in the world or India, you would find dozens of varieties of settlements. There are rural areas in regions like Himachal Pradesh or generally on the hills where you would have very small settlements, small houseable plots, 4 households, 10 households, at the most 20 or 30 or 40 or 50 households living in one village. These village settlements are very small. So when you have small settlements, they are likely to be single caste or single kinship settlements. There would be another settlement 50 yards away or maybe 100 yards away or half a kilometer away, again a very small settlement, right? So you have these smaller settlements in urban areas. But you come to the plains, you would find larger villages with 1,000 population, 2,000, 500 households, even 1,000 households. So these are big settlements, right? And similarly, there is not one kind of city. There's a contiguous settlements, right? You have small rural settlements, you have big rural settlements, you have small cities, slightly bigger cities. Like in India, we have A, B, C, D classification, or class 1, class 2, class 3, class 4 types of cities, depending on the size of population, the nature of occupation, the variety of population that lives. As we go up, obviously the diversity would grow. Obviously, certain kinds of services which can be provided viably to a larger population would change. But there is no dichotomy, there is no binary. So there is a diversity of settlements. And this diversity of settlements does not fit into these two categories of rural and urban. So you don't really have, you can't have separate laws for the understanding of rural society. So there is nothing called independent rural society. Similarly, when we talk about, for example, institutions, family, you have families which are both rural as well as urban. A large number of families in urban, rural India today, where people are slightly prosperous, they would also have a small house in urban area where children would go and study, or people are working. In one family, you would have 3 working members. One person is working on farm, another person has a job in the government and lives in urban area or commutes every day, and the third person does all kinds of odd things, etc., etc. So you have these pluriactive households where families are divided into rural and urban simultaneously. Patterns and natures of migrations also, as I've suggested, it's not only rural to urban, rural to rural, but also rural to other countries, right? If you go to countries like, states like Kerala or Punjab, you would find a lot of people from rural areas, rural settlements of Kerala, go to Gulf, right? And they work there. And after working there for 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, they save some money and come back to the village. They'll build a house. So the complexity of rural development today has to be seen in the larger context in which global society is being integrated. So if there is a demand for labor in Gulf countries, and that demand can be filled by people living in rural areas of Kerala or Andhra Pradesh, they would migrate to those areas. And that migration would also mean that the rural families of those families where men have migrated out have undergone change. So the point I'm trying to make is that the idea of rural has to be taken out of this essentialized notion of the rural. That rural is not an isolated, homogeneous, simple, small settlement where things happen in a particular way. Obviously, things are different in rural areas than they are in urban areas, but rural economy, rural society, rural culture has always been part of the larger society, has always been integrated in the larger society. In the old times, for example, in 15th, 16th century, also you would find that there were small cities. They were not very big cities, but for example, places like Agra or Hyderabad, these are not new cities. These were not set up by the colonial rulers or modern times. These were seats of power where the rulers lived. Right? In Agra, for example, you have this person called Shah Jahan who built a Taj Mahal. And who built Taj Mahal? It was not Shah Jahan or his children who worked together to build Taj Mahal. It was the people living in that area, in rural areas. And who financed Taj Mahal? It was not like Shah Jahan raised a loan from the World Bank to build Taj Mahal. Shah Jahan raised that money by collecting tax, by collecting revenue from the local peasants, people who were working on land. So there were varieties of zamindars, elite, who would work between the actual producer of value, the cultivator, and the king, whosoever it was, whether it was Ashoka or Shah Jahan or Akbar, or it was not question of rulers from one community or caste or religion. All rulers all over the world in the pre-modern times survived primarily on the revenue generated in agriculture. If agriculture was rural, then the surplus was being transferred to urban areas through this elite, either as tax or simply as plunder. Right? So there was an integration in those times of rural areas with the urban areas. With modernization, the pattern changes. And in some areas, for example, when we talk about America, rural has become so insignificant that the discipline of rural sociology began to face serious academic crisis in the 1980s, institutional crisis, because rural society itself disappeared. If you have 2 or 3 or 5% people living in small settlements which are called rural settlements, and they are also employed in commercial agriculture or they're working in other areas. So where is rural society? It doesn't exist. So what do you do with rural sociology? Rural sociology declined. So finally, the point that I would like to make is that one has to look at the dynamics of rural society by situating it in the larger social process, that they are part of larger society. So we cannot have a separate science to study rural society. Rural society has to be studied as integrated part of the larger society, and the patterns are different. It's not necessary that if we have 70% or 69% people living in rural areas and United States of America has 2%, that means we are an underdeveloped society, and once we become developed society like United States of America, very small proportion of Indians would live in rural areas. It's not going to happen because the nature of population, demographic pressure varies significantly from society to society. America never had this kind of population pressure. Europe never had this kind of population pressure. Even when Europe had, it was able to export its surplus population to other parts of the world, Australia, to America. In India, the population density is too high, and if we were to have cities everywhere, things would become very different. So agriculture is declining. For example, the share of agriculture in national income has come down from more than 50% at the time of India's independence to less than 15%, something like 14%, right? So agriculture is becoming less significant even to people living in rural areas. So rural India today is a very diverse social reality. Rural India is not simply people working on farms and agriculture. Incomes that people earn in rural areas come from a variety of sources. There is something called rural non-farm employment. People from rural areas go to urban areas, earn their livelihood. And finally, we will discuss sometime later, that rural India is again very diverse in the sense that you have states like Bihar and Maharashtra and Himachal Pradesh, where urban population is less than 15%. And then you have states like Gujarat and Punjab and Tamil Nadu, where urban population is touching 40%, right? So there are diversities within India, so we cannot really talk in one breath things like rural India and urban India. So there are diverse realities, and this is true about the entire world. So these categories only have a limited demographic value. As social scientists, as sociologists, one has to take them with a pinch of salt. What we need is a kind of sociology of settlements, where we look at settlements. Size of the settlement does affect the kind of social relations people would have, but they are not the only determining variables.
So, as you said, the dynamics and what was supposed to be the characteristic of the rural India earlier, the small, simple, cohesion. So, they are changing. So, in the changing scenario, what are the major point of continuity and change one will try to identify from the student perspective? I am asking question so that they can finally discern this is the rural society and this is the urban society, because some kind of element are mixing each other.
Yes, obviously rural and urban continue to be different. I mean, depends on which rural one is talking about and which urban one is talking about.
Okay.
If one was to compare something like city of Delhi with a small rural settlement with a population of 2,000 people or 1,000 people, or let's say 200 households or 300 households, simply the size would make a lot of difference. Right?
Okay.
If you have a large settlement, it would be, for example, culturally, ethnically very diverse. If you go to city of Delhi, you would find at least 50 different languages being spoken by people living in Delhi, right? Not only the languages of India, but also language of the world. There would be people, communities which speak to each other in Pashto. There would be communities who speak, all the embassies would have the languages of their own country. At least 50 plus languages are spoken in the city of Delhi.
Right.
But in the village, everyone speaks the same dialect. Not only the language, everyone speaks and behaves in a particular way. So there is significant diversity in bigger settlements. And as the settlement grows, diversity grows. And the diversity is not simply in terms of culture, but diversity is also in terms of occupations. The kind of diversity that you have in rural areas, for example, Indian rural areas have always been diverse, as I was discussing because of caste, but the kind of diversity that you would have in urban areas, occupational diversity. There would be thousands of different occupations that people have in city like Delhi. In village, there would be 5 or 10 or at the most 20 different kinds of jobs that people do. So all kinds of diversity, diversity of color, diversity of race, diversity of culture, diversity of economics, diversity of occupation, diversity of social organization.
So, given this concept or context, we say, when we talk about the rural development, what one exactly mean by this rural development? Yeah, what should be the focus?
Yes, the idea of rural development in a sense comes from what I was trying to tell you earlier, some notion of evolution, some notion of development process, that rural is somehow, by definition, is less developed, because rural is not yet urban, therefore rural needs to grow up.
Okay.
And right from the time of independence, the focus was that rural is the site of backwardness, right? That's where development has to happen. From a first 5-year plan, or even during the freedom movement, there was a lot of discussion on what is called as the land question, right? So agriculture, Indian agriculture is very backward, peasant is starving, agriculture is not growing, productivity is very low. So all those problems were there. And that's when we started rural development program, starting with community development program and land reforms. And then over the years, we have had several developmental programs.
Right.
Now, some of these programs have suffered from the kind of dominant understanding of the rural society. For example, when community development program was introduced in 1952, 2nd October 1952, it was based on the assumption that rural India is a homogeneous community. And you provide some kind of impetus for development, it would be for everyone would develop. But in reality, rural India was much more differentiated than it was assumed by people who were framing rural development program, because they had this American notion of community.
Okay.
And when it was introduced, people who benefited from the community development program were the ones who were dominant sections in the village society. Those who were on the margins, those who were not really very influential, they did not get any other benefit. So that's why community development program was assessed and criticized and then abandoned. And then you have different kinds of rural development program which target specific groups. Like we have integrated rural development program,
Right.
but we have also a productivity oriented program like Green Revolution. So that's again a very interesting and complex history of India's rural development, and which in itself is very interesting kind of subject to study.
So one way of looking at this thing, the infrastructural development, then of course what we call them, they are from the same kinship or from the same way of talking or dialect, whatever they do. So maintaining those things and then providing infrastructure and bringing other the modern what we call a modern way of leading a life. So we need to evolve a kind of paraphernalia or say parameters that will help us to make the rural development. So is that kind of thing?
It's a very good question. No, this is a very good question, because when we think about infrastructure development, we think again about the homogeneity of rural areas.
Right.
So what you would do, you will take a road to the village, you would develop infrastructure. But again, unless you understand the diversity of rural India, the internal differences that we have, who is going to access that infrastructure? For example, in a country like India, where caste plays a very significant role, and if you have a common well in the village, the common well is going to be the well of the dominant community, right? So it's possible that Dalits are not even allowed to fetch water from that common well. So how do you incorporate those factors, right? Now with the agricultural development, the local areas have become much more congested, right? There used to be a lot of common land in the village. So toilet has become one of the biggest problems. And toilet is not simply a question of private requirement, it's also a question of infrastructure. So how do you address that? Do we have common toilets for everyone? Because the open lands are not available, ponds have disappeared, so those problems. So infrastructure, rural infrastructure needs to be conceptualized keeping in mind the requirement of people living in rural areas and their challenges and the emerging challenges. So these problems did not exist until 1970s. It's after Green Revolution that development has happened, new people have come and settled down. So you have different kinds of problems. Ponds have disappeared. So toilet, for example, has become one of the major problems in rural areas, and it creates much more, it becomes a much bigger issue for women, right? And again, women from particular communities, because those who have smaller houses, smaller lands, they find it very difficult to kind of, have a toilet of their own, because there is no space, there are no resources, while upper castes or dominant communities, richer households would still have toilets, and they will also have space of their own to go out, while these poor people then also get attacked. And for women, it's like also a question of, going out in the open during the daytime becomes a different kind of problem.
Okay. So when we look at the last 60 years after independence in the context of India, we find that at the level of idea, at the level of policy, the things has been in place, but when it comes to the practice, there's some kind of disconnect, or it has failed or have not taken off as it was expected. So for that, what a sociological approach need to be adopted in implementing the developmental project, or say the rural development project?
No, I think one should kind of make a proper balanced assessment. If you look at the literature on rural development or the change that has happened in India, some areas we have had remarkable success. It's just that we in urban areas are used to criticizing everything, so we don't understand the nature of change that has come about in rural areas. It's only by doing empirical work that we realize how much has changed in rural areas, right? For example, with Green Revolution in many parts of India, agriculture has become a very vibrant economic activity. Otherwise also the way rural people are mobile and their aspiration for mobility to go to urban areas, caste system has changed significantly. Old kind of relations don't exist any longer. So it's easy to say that programs are not being implemented, and that is also true. There is an element of corruption, but with democratization, the pressure is also increased from below. That people would vote for you only when you deliver.
Right.
So there is a new kind of consciousness in rural areas with democratization. All kinds of pressures, diversities kind of begin to take shape, begin to kind of articulate themselves. So it's not a very simple question of of development not being implemented. That is a kind of urban slogan. Yes, there is a lot of leakage, there is a lot of corruption, there are problems, but at the same time, if you were to look at the last 70 years, in some areas the successes have been remarkable. Cooperative movement in Gujarat and some other parts of India, green revolution in many parts of India, even the latest MG Narega program,
Yeah.
in many ways has been very successful in some areas.
So now we have a question, as I told you, that we have a success story. So is there a need of documenting a success story? There is already we have, and we can use that as a tool of a sociological studies.
Definitely. Not just sociological studies, we should also use them as example. For example, some programs have been very successful in states like Tamil Nadu or Kerala, and we should learn from those states.
Right.
And also there is a kind of effort to learning from those states, and they have tried to change programs, to tune them wherever, for example, women have been actively involved in implementation of the program, or they are the beneficiaries. The chances are that the programs will be more successful than if the money is given to men. So there are many other questions also that we need to learn from success stories. Why is it that cooperatives or cooperative movement right from the 60s and 70s became very successful in Western India, Gujarat or Maharashtra,
Right.
but in other parts of India it didn't take off as well. So we need to learn from there, and we can learn only by understanding those things and understanding the dynamics, what kind of political forces operate and try to defeat programs, what kind of political forces are helpful. So all those things have to be taken into account.
Okay, so what do you think now that the rural India, which was previously they were limiting themselves, not coming, not open to the other ideas, or going with the changes that are happening elsewhere, but now they are open to go that way. So do you agree with this? We need to still make the things aware, make them aware, or we need to operate on that line also? We need to operate at different level.
One, I think most important thing when we are talking about rural India today, we must recognize the diversities, that we are not talking about one rural India.
Yeah.
Right? The varieties of rural regions, the varieties of problems.
This
within that also,
is from the policy makers' point of
precisely.
view.
No, I'm talking from policy makers' point of view.
Okay.
If we have to work in, say, a state like Himachal Pradesh or the hills of India, the attitude has to be very different. The policies have to be very different. So there are diversities, significant diversities. If you were to go to Chhattisgarh, Jharkhand, Bihar, Madhya Pradesh, these are areas where what you are saying that you need different kinds of attitude. In Bihar, for example, 85% of population still lives in rural areas. There are very few big cities, right?
Right.
There are very little urbanization. So what does it mean? We don't really know. There is some literature available. Or these are small towns. People, towns with 30,000, 50,000 population. What kind of occupations people have there? So these are rural areas or urban areas. How do you classify them? So the large number of population in India lives in these small towns, which are, demographically or according to census definition, they have become urban areas, but actually they continue to be in many ways rural areas. And same is the case with other rural areas, that many areas where even smaller rural settlements of 300 households or 3,000 people would have very diversified workforce. Right? Agriculture has become insignificant or has disappeared because of the big projects or some other natural processes or environmental problems. So how do you deal with those issues? How do you deal with those questions? So we must identify diversities in the way rural society is evolving in India, and therefore you need to have diversified policy. You can't have one policy for every region, one policy for every. So our understanding of rural has to be, in a sense, changed into something which is open. It's not something which is reified, one specific reality out there that is rural, and if you go to wherever, you can't have one policy. That's why we need to criticize the idea of rural as it has been constructed as opposite of urban. Rural can be of a variety of types. And this variety also means that you have to approach them for development in a variety of ways. And if we don't do that, then the development programs will not have desired results. Yes, there is corruption, but there can also be problem of framing of the program, of their implementation, of the agents who are there involved in the process of implementation. So
Okay.
all that needs to be kind of taken into account.
So these are the dynamics of rural society. When we talk about the economy of rural society, how they are undergoing transformation.
Yes, that's also very, very important question, because rural economy, as we were discussing earlier, is assumed to be agrarian economy based on agriculture. And agriculture has declined much more rapidly in India than rural areas have declined. Rural population continues to be very large, but agriculture as part of the national income has come down to only 14%. But more importantly here, even as part of the rural incomes, agriculture has come down considerably. Agriculture at the national level does not contribute even half to the total rural incomes.
Okay.
That means people working and living in rural areas earn more from non-agricultural activities than they earn from agricultural activities. So that's a very important change,
Yes.
right? So what are they doing? We know a little bit about what is known as non-farm employment, but what is rural non-farm employment? Where is it coming from? There are different dynamics in different parts of the country, right? In some areas, it's the local level market that has grown. People have started doing all kinds of odd jobs because of the number of households is large. Some people are working outside, continue to live in rural areas, so there is consumption power. So lots of shops have opened, lots of local level activity has started. So there are people employed there, but they're also going out because there is development outside, there is infrastructure projects, there are government-sponsored programs, but also industry and urbanization. So there are all kinds of things happening. This informal employment in a kind of non-agricultural sector
Right.
has grown very significantly.
So what do you suggest, because we have come from the agricultural stage to many other layer has come up, industrial service, then in network society, all kind of thing happening. So what do you suggest, can we skip one or two stage and take to a rural society to a higher stage?
No, that's what, we don't need to skip and we can't skip. This is not a question, this is not a decision that can be made by developmental planners.
Okay.
It can and should not be made sitting in New Delhi or state capital.
Okay.
These are people,
They were allowed to evolve.
not question of evolving, but there is a process through which people have to participate in the process of development.
Okay.
They have their own opinion, they have their own vision. And their vision needs to be taken into account when we are thinking of policy. What do they think is good for them? Right? For example, you impose big projects in certain areas and then there are protest movements. Right? If they don't want those projects, why should you install those projects? Unless you take the rural communities along, if they see that these kinds of projects are going to damage them, then we obviously cannot implement those projects. So it's not private property of the big corporate sector or the state. Everyone where they are living, they have rights over their resources.
Right.
Natural resources also belong to them. And these communities and their cultural rights need to be respected. They have to be communicated. If they understand, they have their own understanding, and sometimes their understanding is more scientific than the understanding coming from above.
Yeah, that is true, but
Yeah.
here the question comes of the conflict psychology or the conflict sociology, when the opinion maker, the other group came to the local area and they try to influence their opinion and making opinion.
Yeah, precisely.
Yeah.
So the conflict happens when one party tries to bully the other party.
Okay.
When there is negotiation, there is dialogue, if their aspirations are also taken into account, if they are completely adamant that we don't want a dam here, we don't want a big project here,
Okay.
it should not be done. At the end of the day, if it is for development, what is development? Development, as Amartya Sen says, is freedom, is well-being. Right? If it is well-being of the local people and their notion of well-being is preserving that environment. Some areas, for example, in hill areas, environment is very fragile. Right? If you disturb, if you put a dam there, it might generate electricity, but it would destroy lots of other sources of livelihood. Right? There are streams going in different areas, there are other kinds of natural resources, there is flora and fauna of that area which would get affected. And that has value for local people. So getting an employment in a big project would be of very little value, but
Yeah.
they know that if these streams continue, we will get our fruits, we will get our vegetables, we'll have our agriculture. So their notion of well-being needs to be taken into account.
Well, that is true, but freedom, well-being, even the country like Bhutan and other country, they are having happiness index. So we don't know it, but can we quantify them? Yeah, the country like India, which is preferably called a developing country, can we allow everyone to go on this line? Yeah, we have our own reservation also.
Of course, we can. I mean, we are a democratic country, and that is the meaning of democracy. If we don't accept that, then we should not say that we are a democratic country. If we are a democratic country, then we have to take into consideration the will of the local people.
That is of primary importance.
That is, I mean, development is required, but everybody is pro-development. Nobody is anti-development.
Right.
The point is that who is going to benefit out of development? If one makes them realize that this is a developmental process which is going to benefit everyone, and most importantly the local people. If you are going to develop, cities of Delhi by taking water from Himachal Pradesh, then obviously people in Himachal Pradesh are not going to be happy, and that is not development for them. That is dispossession for them. So that is where we need to communicate, and we need to be very clear that democracy means everyone has to come along.
Yeah, but
that's why inclusive growth. Inclusive growth means including everyone.
Yeah, that is true, but here the other concept of development is South Pole, North Pole concept of development.
Yeah, but that is disastrous. I mean, that has been disastrous wherever it has. I mean, that is now over. There's a lot of criticism of that, and people have not really been able to defend it. If we want to develop just a small corporate sector, and then we expect that everyone will follow.
So we need a kind of new concept, new idea.
It's already there. I mean, I don't have any new ideas, but these are ideas that have already been practiced in many countries, and they are being practiced. Okay. In Western countries also, where they had these old ideas of big developmental programs, now local communities matter a lot. Right? You go to countries like Sweden or Norway or even Germany, so they have a notion of big development, but they also have a notion of small level community participation. Communities have to decide what is good for them, and they kind of participate. In different parts of the world, different models are being experimented. And India is also, in a sense, trying to experiment. And if we want to kind of have a true development, which obviously means, as you said, happiness, it's not simply wealth, then obviously one has to visualize development beyond money and wealth.
Okay, so in the end, we would like to ask you for a 5 dimension which will help us to understand now this rural society is at par with, at least we can say this is the good rural society. What are the 5 dimensions we would like to
There's
look at?
Nothing like that. One should not, precisely, that is the point. One should not reduce it to point 1, point 2, point 3, point 4. Rural society is, the idea of rural society itself is a temporary construct. There's nothing called essential rural society. Rural society of 15th century in North India was very different from what we have today, or even what we had in the 18th century, what we had in the 17th century. Within India also there are different kinds of rural societies. So the point that one is making is that one should not divide settlements into simply rural and urban, but the idea is to have a notion of settlements which makes sense and which is a contiguous, in the sense that there is a rural-urban continuum, or there are rural settlements, bigger rural settlements, smaller urban settlements, bigger urban settlements, metropolitan big cities, right? So you have variety of settlements, and then we need to have a kind of understanding how settlements impact social relations, how settlements provide opportunities for economic growth, how settlements become constraints for certain kind of programs, right? Okay. What kind of politics is possible? In India, unlike most other parts of the world, rural areas have been very enthusiastically participating in democratic politics, right? So we can't say that rural areas are backward simply because they're small settlements.
Right.
So one should not have these preconceived notions that rural is site of backwardness, rural areas where people are illiterate, rural areas where there are no facilities. That is not true any longer.
Okay.
Rural area people have their own awareness, their own notions, and they are like us.
Yeah.
So they are part of the larger society. They are not different. They are same, but yes, there are differences of settlements, the kind of amenities that are available there, which would vary within the city of Delhi also. There are slums in Delhi, there are middle class areas, there are rich areas, there are other areas which are deprived. So you have variety of kind of diversities everywhere.
Okay. So well friends, there are so many things we need to discuss, but we don't have time. So with this word we conclude the lecture. I thank all of you for watching the lecture, and on behalf I thank Dr. Surinder Singh Jyotka for giving such an insightful lecture on this very topic. Thank you very much.